Hello, this is T West, and welcome to AfroSynergy. NATO violates United Nations resolution weapons embargo on Libya. What we are observing is a criminal entity which has been such an entity for a very, very long time, falling apart before our very eyes. The United Nations Security Council resolution applied an arms embargo against Libya. The Libyan government has not received arms since the start of the assault by NATO upon the Libyan people. However, because the criminal entity's attack dog, known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, it has not been able to achieve its goal of turning the Libyan people against their government and the tribal leaders of Libya. The governments of NATO have approved of the illegal violation of its own arms embargo against Libya by supplying the rebel criminal forces in Libya with all sorts of weapons. We first saw this with France parachuting weapons to the Libyan criminals in the western mountains of Libya, encouraging these criminals to use those weapons to attack the civilians of Tripoli. The American State Department, headed by the chief criminal and wife of Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, quickly verbally stated its support of the French providing of weapons to the Libyan criminals. The military head of NATO stated that NATO is abiding by the arms embargo and that it was the sole decision of France, not NATO's, to provide those weapons to the criminal rebels in the western mountains of Libya. Now, we learn today that NATO itself has conspired with Qatar, a slave state of the Zionist entity, to provide the rebels in Libya with weapons with which to terrorize the Libyan people. NATO has the legal responsibility to enforce the United Nations resolution banning arms shipment to Libya. NATO has a responsibility to stop any member of its organization from shipping weapons to Libya. It did not do so with France, and it certainly did not do so with Qatar. Well, what does all of this mean? It means Russia and other countries can now arm the Libyan government, and it means that the United Nations Secretary General has a responsibility to call an emergency session to deal with NATO's clear violation of the United Nations resolution and the United States State Department's violation by supporting and encouraging France to violate the United Nations arms embargo resolution. We demand that the African Union call an emergency session with the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon and that Russia and China do the same. If the United Nations Secretary General refuse and/or the United States, Britain, or France block this emergency meeting, the African Union, China, and Russia must seriously contemplate leaving the United Nations because it has clearly become what the League of Nations was. The world does not need a group of nuclear-armed nations running amok in Africa, bombing and killing under the pretense of saving lives and as they threaten Syria. It was once said by America that they killed more than 100,000 Japanese to save lives. Are they God, such that they can look into the future and foretell what lives may or may not be lost? Here is the ABC report of Libya's government's press secretary showing the evidence of the weapons taken from the rebels which had been provided to them by Qatar, a member nation of the Arab League, which voted for the military actions now being carried out against a member of the African Union, Libya, a non-member of the Arab League.
When we captured the two boats and questioned the Libyan rebels, they admitted that they had communications with NATO and that NATO arranged the submission of these weapons to them, and that the whole operation was provided by the Qatari army with the coordination of NATO ships in the Mediterranean.